welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'm Aaron Porras, and with me today to discuss the latest geopolitical developments are Yariv Oppenheimer, a board member and former director of Peace Now, and Avihu Sofer, a teacher of political science at Haifa University and a Ma'ariv columnist. The topics that we'll be discussing today include another look into the southern Syria ceasefire just inked between Russia, the United States, and Jordan. But first, the terror attack that has shaken the region. I'm talking, of course, about the recent attack on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where 3 Israeli Arabs opened fire on a group of Israeli police officers, killing 2 of them. The Al-Aqsa Temple Mount compound was immediately closed and reopened 2 days later, but with cameras, metal detectors, and beefed-up security. Now, Palestinians, Jordanians, and Israeli Arabs alike are protesting and decrying the move.
أنا بعتقد أنه يعني لا يحتاج نتنياهو لذرائع من أجل كل ما يقوم به الآن، سواء إغلاق المسجد الأقصى المبارك لهذه الأيام وهي سابقة تشكل خطرا وجريمة بحق الفلسطينيين والأمة العربية والإسلامية جمعاء. والأمر الثاني هو أيضا ما يقوم به الاحتلال في سياق البوابات وفي سياق فرض الأمن وفي سياق كل ما يقوم به هي محاولة لفرض وقائع على الأرض.
نحن أهل المسجد الأقصى وراضيين في المسجد الأقصى، والمسجد الأقصى عقيدة، ولن يكون المسجد الأقصى إلا للمسلمين فقط.
Okay, so my first question, I want to jump right into this. The attack was said to have been aided by an Al-Aqsa Waqf member. What is Israel doing? What should Israel do in terms of control over the Temple Mount? I'm going to start with you, Avihu.
Well, let's understand how this whole thing started. It started with 3 young Israeli Arabs, not Palestinians that were brought up in the territories, but Israeli Arabs that were brought up in the Israeli education system that hold IDs, Israeli IDs, that went up to the 3rd holiest place for the Muslims and the holiest place for the Jews in Jerusalem and murdered 2 police officers. Now, it's not that Israel woke up in the morning and decided to close the Temple of Mount or decided to start checking people at the entrance and magnometers and all these cameras
right.
and everything that you mentioned. It happened after a terror attack, which could burn the Middle East, by the way. It could develop into something very bad. So Israel had to react somehow to the activities, to the terror attack that happened on the Temple of Mount. What Israel did is basically close the Temple of Mount for 1 day. For 1 day it closed it, opened it the next day with some security arrangements in order to allow the prayers to carry on. Now let's understand what are we talking about. There are 10 gates into the Temple of Mount. Through 9 of them, Arab Muslims are entering the Temple of Mount. Through 1 of them, Jews are entering the Temple of Mount. Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple of Mount. They are not allowed, they're hardly going up to the Temple of Mount, and they're going through magnometers, meaning they are checked at the entrance and so on. The Arabs refused to be checked. And the check came after a terror attack happened on the mountain. Now, Israel is keeping the rights of the Israeli Arabs to pray on the mountain, really in such a status quo, in such a serious way. They allowed the Waqf to organize everything, the Jordanian Waqf, which are organizing all the arrangements and everything. But since there was a terror attack on the mountain and 2 officers were murdered by 3 Israeli Arabs, so what is Israel expected to do? To close its eyes about it?
So my question is, I mean, you know, with these metal detectors, you have them in these 9 Muslim-only gates, but you mentioned that there are metal detectors
on the gate where Jews are entering the mount. There is a metal detector. Now, one more word: in the Kotel, in the Wailing Wall, which is very close to the Temple of Mount, there are every Jew who enters to pray in the Wailing Wall goes through metal detector, and nobody has a problem with that.
First of all, we all agree that this terrorist attack, we should condemn it. Even Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, condemned this attack while speaking with Netanyahu on the phone.
Not the Israeli...
No, I didn't get into your things,
okay.
so allow me. And this is the basic. But after condemning, we need to think what we can do next in order to prevent the next terrorist to come and also to lower down the flame. Because the motivation of the Muslim world to act against Israel and against Israeli targets usually is being motivated by things going on in the Temple Mount. So this is a very sensitive place. Now, what is actually is being offered now is to change dramatically the current situation, the status quo, and to create more facts on the ground that will create the situation in which the Palestinians will feel that the Israelis are taking over the mosque and having a new checkpoints in the entrance to a place that most of the time is empty of Israelis and Jews. And when there are Israeli Jews going up, there are soldiers protecting them. So there is no need to any new checkpoint. This checkpoint is only to embarrass, to humiliate, and to make it's very clear for the Muslim to show them that we are responsible for this place. And this is not the way to lower down the tension. This is the best way to energize the new Palestinian youth to act violently against Israel and to create, as you said, flame all over the Middle East.
Aaron, allow me to comment to Yariv's words, which are important. Abbas condemned the terror attack. The Israeli Knesset members, the Arab Israeli Knesset members, who are
condemn it as well.
who are members in the Israeli Knesset, it took them 3 days to not decide whether they are condemning, what are they saying exactly, should they condemn the terror attack, should they condemn the occupation, and blah, 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 and so on. They are very confused in who are they loyal to, the same way as they were in the funeral to the Israeli president, ex-Israeli president Shimon Peres, where they decided not to come to his funeral, when Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, came to his funeral.
One
word about the...
Yeah, but let me just say, the leader of the Joint Arab List condemned it very clearly in Hebrew and in Arabic.
Not the Balad members.
And he said it out loud. And we need to remember that just to condemn it, it's not enough. You need to think what you should do in order to stop it. And when you got a minister in the Israeli cabinet going with the dress, with the picture of Al-Aqsa Mosque all around the world and making a show to the Muslim world that we are in control and to humiliate the Muslim world, so the motivation to attack is much higher. They don't need the Arab member list. They can listen to the right-wing speakers and to understand that they have to act. And because they are not a part of the Israeli society, they cannot take down the Knesset by democratic way. So the only thing that they are doing is violence. This is the only way for them to make you listen and to think maybe it's wrong.
So I have two questions then to follow up. Number one, how you're saying it's just to humiliate these metal detectors. So what should Israel do to create a safer environment on the Temple Mount? And second, as far as Abbas is concerned, he was not long ago calling for a day of rage on the Temple Mount.
Because the Palestinian people feel that the situation on the Temple Mount is changing, and the Israeli right wing is doing its best in order to do it. Every week we are getting new video from the people that went up and did some provocation things there and changed the status quo in order to create a new environment in this very sensitive place. Now we need to be responsible, and we need to think wisely how we can lower down the flame. These new checkpoints, it's not just humiliation, it's the way of the right-wing government to show sovereignty over this place. I don't need to show any sovereignty if this is a religious place. So let's take down all the flags. Let's say it's not Israeli, it's not Palestinian, it's just holy place. At the day that the Israeli government will say, we are ready to give up sovereignty, political sovereignty, and we are offering the Muslim world to open this place only for religious activities, then there will be a huge challenge for the Palestinians.
No, there's a small problem with what Yariv is saying. Yariv, as most of the left-wing people in Israel, although I respect him very much, is confused in his point of view. Israel is controlling Jerusalem. Let's not be confused. Jerusalem, the Western Jerusalem, the Eastern Jerusalem, the Temple of Mount, the Wailing Wall, everything, East Jerusalem is occupied, or is sovereignty, however you want to call it, by Israel. This is an Israeli territory, 1. 2, Israel is in charge on the security on the Temple of Mount. 2 policemen in uniform were murdered on Friday, guys. One second, Yariv. It's not that somebody walked. Yariv, 1 second.
But
Yariv,
to the Temple Mount.
you know that the way
if
that you
got
present
this
it,
checkpoint, they will kill them
the way
with the
that you present
checkpoints.
it is not balanced. It's not that somebody woke up in the morning and decided to start showing we are controlling the Temple of Mount. Somebody woke up in the morning in Al-Fahim, which is inside Israel. 1 second. 3 young guys drove to Jerusalem, took weapons, and murdered 2.
So you are allowing these people? No, but
2 officers who were protecting
you don't need to explain to
the
me.
people that came
you don't
up there.
need to explain to me.
Since then, the authorities are looking for ways to keep
You
the
don't.
Mount
You don't need to.
safe.
You don't need
As
to.
simple as
You
that.
don't
Hold
need
on,
to
I'd like to hear your
explain to
response.
me about the terrorist. I will tell you very clearly that if you had this magnometer, these gates before this incident, it will never help, because where these
know,
soldiers
maybe
were
yes, maybe
killed,
no.
they were killed at the entrance to the gate, and we know about the
from the
we
back.
know about the security
back,
barrier.
yeah,
We
I'd
know
like to
about the
finish.
security barrier, that you can use security means in order to create political effects on the ground. And you got a minister of the police that is a political figure, and he's in favor of that, not by incident. And I think that this act is not going to supply any one of us security. It's just going to give more reasons for the young Palestinians to fight Israelis.
So-
and I don't
so
want
I'd
to.
like to
How
talk-
are you
I'd
going to
like-
prevent
We
the
pray
next
Hold on,
for,
hold on, hold on. I'd
for
like
these
to touch-
gates. These
I'd-
gates are holy. The
So I'd like
magnometer
to follow
became
up.
holy for Jewish people.
Well, so I wanted to say, let's say we take down, let's say we do the things that you just proposed, yeah? We take down the magnometers, the metal detectors, and we allow, no flag ownership sovereignty over the thing, and over the Temple Mount, and we allow full religious practice. So wouldn't that change the status quo as well? Because right now the status quo is that Jews cannot pray there.
The current status quo is that Jews cannot pray there. I'm not so happy with that.
And the
with
Jordanian
that.
Waqf is
Hold on,
controlling
Yeah,
it.
that's true. And all the government in Israel, including right-wing government and Netanyahu supporting of the current status quo regarding security. Security combine two things. First of all, to the motivation of the people to attack, and to lower down the motivation, you need to negotiate with the Waqf, with the Jordanian Waqf, with the Jordanian government, and to lower down the flames. And second, about physical things that can allow security. And if, for example, you will add another policeman that will look into the Temple Mount and not just back, so you have the solution. These gates are not a solution. This is a problem. This is going to create more clashes between Israelis and Palestinians. And you know that for Palestinians to be checked by Israelis when Israelis control the Palestinians, this is an act of humiliation. And this will bring more violence and not going to supply anyone security.
Just to be
Unfortunately, I'm
one
so
word,
sorry,
just to be more accurate, the Jordanian Waqf is still controlling the Temple of Mount. Israel is in charge of the security. All the religious services on the Temple of Mount are ceremonied and are made by the Jordanian Waqf people. Israel is in charge of the security of the Temple of Mount, one second, because Israel is controlling Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Israel. I understand that Yariv thinks that East Jerusalem might not
I'm a bit
belong to
confused.
Israel.
Who is controlling Jerusalem? Because you said that Israel now
sorry.
it's the Waqf. But
Well,
for
I
your
apologize.
question,
We have to move on. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
We've run out of time for this
Next.
topic. I apologize. I know that there's a lot going on
We'll
here.
argue on the
and I
next
would love-
topic as well. That's
I
okay.
would love to continue on this topic for longer, but unfortunately we have to move on. All right, now moving on to our second topic. The United States, Russia, and Jordan have finished a newly brokered ceasefire in southern Syria. For many, an end to the fighting sounds great, but for others, particularly in Israel, the ceasefire as written doesn't go far enough, particularly with respect to Iran. Speaking with journalists in Paris, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the agreement helps Iran set up a hostile presence on Israel's northern border, as it doesn't interfere with Iranian plans to create a land route linking Lebanon to Iran through Syria and Iraq, nor does it prevent the establishment of Iranian naval or air force bases. In response, at a recent meeting in Belarus, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said this.
Могу гарантировать, что мы сделали все, и американская сторона сделала все, чтобы интересы безопасности Израиля в рамках этой конструкции были полностью учтены.
So my first question, and Yariv, I'm going to start with you this time. The ceasefire was brokered between the United States, Jordan, and Russia. First of all, where is Assad and the rebel groups and all these other players? How come we're not hearing their voices?
Russia is usually the sponsor of also the Assad regime. So when Russia is making an agreement, it's actually Assad that is being obligated to this agreement. So I will take it very seriously. The issue here is, first of all, that we cannot control everything. And there are things that are going on around us that we can try to impact, but we cannot have a control over what's going on in Syria. And I think that the Prime Minister of Israel is showing a responsibility, and he is not doing anything in order to create the impression that we are interfering in what's going on there. However, Netanyahu said a few times that the best friend of Israel in the White House ever is then the current president Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is going to sign this agreement. So if this agreement is working against Israel, so whether he's still our good friend, and what is the role of Netanyahu by doing something in order to prevent it. I have one advice to Netanyahu. If you think that this agreement is so bad, go to the American Congress and speak to the American Congress about a bad agreement. You did it before. Maybe you can do it right now.
That's kind of what I wanted to know.
again.
You know, why do you think Netanyahu is going to Macron in France when he has nothing to do with this deal?
I think the situation is much more complicated than what we are seeing. At the moment, Iran is building a corridor, a continental corridor from the Persian Gulf to Lebanon. Basically, it's allowing it to attack Israel from three directions. From Iran directly, through missiles and so on, from Lebanon, and of course through Syria, which is now becoming the northern border of Israel is from a quiet border, which we knew how to handle the Syrian army. At the moment, we're having the Iranian army and its groups, the Hezbollah or other groups are on our northern border. And this is not a simple situation for Israel. This is a situation which is putting a threat, a conventional threat, not a missile threat, a conventional threat on Israel on its northern border for the first time, because Lebanon is not conventionally threatening Israel. Lebanon, through Hezbollah, could attack Israel with missiles and maybe through soldiers. At the moment, when Iran is there, it's becoming much more complicated. Now, having the Russians there, turning this into nearly an impossible problem to deal with. And Yariv is right, but Israel cannot manipulate the Americans through its interest with the Russians. It's becoming too much. Israel could speak with the Americans about the interests of Israel. Once Russia and America have their own interest with no connection to Israel, it's becoming much more complicated to handle, because Russia is not a country, a superpower that you can, negotiate too much with. Trump moving to his first steps is not going to get into problems with Putin at the moment. So Netanyahu is really tied from many directions, and he's trying to protect Israel. Just one thing.
Sure.
We learned in the past, and we know it in the present as well. Israel is the only continent or the only country that could protect Israel. We cannot count, with all the respect, the Americans. We cannot count the Russians or Lavrov or anybody else who's saying so. We cannot count the UN. We can trust Israel to protect Israel. And at the moment, we are tying our hands and not allowing ourselves to protect ourselves from Iran. And this is not a simple problem.
So aren't our hands already to a degree tied, considering, let's say that Iran is creating this corridor despite this agreement, despite the ceasefire, despite everything, and Israel decides one day to send a preemptive strike. How does that work under a ceasefire agreement with Iran, with Russia and the United States?
Definitely, there is a game changer here, and we have the Middle East before Russia in Syria and after Russia in Syria. And my lesson from all of this is that eventually, like any other state, by the way, like America, like Russia, we need to defend ourselves, but we definitely need to have the international community behind us. No one country in the world can do it by itself. Everyone needs the assistance and the interest, the common interest together with the world. And my outcome of all this very, very complicated situation is that we need to look for ways to reach out for countries that will be together with us, standing in front of that. And
with the Sunni countries.
once the Palestinian issue is on the table, then we are hearing from the right wing. We don't need anyone. Who is the United Nations? Who is the American government when it was Obama? Let's see what the right wing government will do when Trump will push for the negotiation. I think that if Israel will be able to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we will be much stronger to face the threats coming from Iran, and Iran will have zero legitimization to attack Israel in the international community, even within the Arab world.
But Yariv, you are ignoring the fact that Israel today have the best coordination with the Sunni countries, with the Saudi Arabias, with the Emirates, with Jordan, with Egypt. We have a whole line of countries which are working together with us against the Iranians. So the right-wing government that you're saying is the only one that, by the way, has managed at the moment to create a coalition of countries, Arab countries, by the way, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Emirates, and Jordan against Iran. despite that, the fact that Russia has its own interest with no connection to Israel and with no connection to the US in the Middle East is making everything much more complicated. This is why Netanyahu is trying as careful as he can to handle the Russians in the best way that you can. You can't threat Russia.
So are there
Israel
any
cannot threat
repercussions?
Russia. It's not something that we can do.
So is there any sort of repercussion against Iran should they be caught, red-handed creating this corridor?
It's not only that. Iran is on its way to a nuclear bomb. Iran is financing most of the terror in the world today. They're financing Hezbollah, they're financing Hamas, they're financing the Muslim Brothers.
But that's not my question. I'm saying if this ceasefire were broken in any way by Iran, by actions that Iran causes, what kind of repercussions are there?
Well, Israel will be facing Iran and Russia behind
so it's
it.
on Israel?
Yeah.
And Russia behind it. It's not simple.
Israel will face Iran only if Iran will attack Israel, and not even that, because Hezbollah in the past attacked Israel. It was actually Iran that has been moving Hezbollah to attack us, and we fight Hezbollah. We didn't fight Iran. And everything is true except of one thing. Because of the deal that Obama did with Iran, the deal that the right-wing government, including Netanyahu, was against it, the bad deal. Because of that, and due of this deal, we have Iran stop promoting the nuclear project, and there is no nuclear bomb for Iran. And we have to thank Obama for that, because without the deal with Iran, our situation today was much more complicated and much more dangerous than the one that we are facing.
All right, so then to finish our show now, I'd like to finish on a positive note. This is a new segment that we just introduced in our previous episode. But final thoughts on any of our two subjects, silver lining. Let's hear it. Yeah.
I will go back to the first issue. Although we have a lot of dispute and we think differently about things, still we need to remember that this incident, in this very horrible incident, 2 policemen were killed, but these were policemen that belongs to the Druze minorities within inside Israel, not Jewish, but Druze minorities. And the relationship, the good relationship between Jewish people in Israel and the Druze in Israel show that when you have equal rights and when you have respect to each other, you can have joint living life, coexistence here in Israel. I hope that the relationship between Israel and Druze will be an example of how Jewish people can feel good and can create society with minorities that are not Jewish, including the Arab minority within inside the Israeli society.
Yeah, I'll go as well to the Israeli Arab society in Israel. You know, I teach political science in the University of Haifa, and probably 30 or 40% of the students are Arabs, Israeli Arabs. Today, I think 90% of the Israeli Arabs are more interested in education, in transportation, in what their children will learn, in hospitals, in rights, and in positive things, and not in terror. What we saw on the Temple of Mount, I think, is very, very different from what the Israeli Arabs want. I think that the right-wing government is probably doing the historical decision 922 of investing more than 5 billion shekels in the Israeli Arab population, something that has never happened in the past 70 years, not to that account. I think what's happening with the Israeli Arabs is a very positive process. Unfortunately, to my point of view, the Israeli Arab Knesset members are going totally to a different direction, and I would hope that they would change their direction and go together with most of the Israeli Arabs.
Thank you very much. All right, so unfortunately that is all the time we have today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our two guests, Yariv Oppenheimer and Avihu Sofer, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.